Hello, everyone. This is Whitney Will from Star Hearth Astrology, and I'm here today to talk to you about Libra season 2021. So Libra season runs from September 23rd to October 22nd in 2021 and covers the sun's time in the sign of Libra. So in this video, I'll go over kind of the major story arcs of the season and then break them down transit by transit. The way that you can get the most out of this is by having your birth chart in front of you and noticing which houses the planets fall in your birth chart to start connecting the stories of what might be happening in your chart. So let's get right into it. This year's Libra season is really about straddling and balancing. We had kind of a little bit of a respite in Virgo season, and that respite was hopefully used to kind of figure things out, stabilize, get some kind of supports in place for the rest of the year, because the rest of the year tends to get a little bit more teetering. And then by the end of 2021, we are really in a lot of tumultuous astro weather, which doesn't mean it's going to affect everybody, and it's not a doom game, right? A lot of tumultuous stuff can really free us from things, but it definitely changes the game. And that's really the story of 2021 with the Saturn-Uranus squares, is looking for sustainable structures and then having them break down almost as quickly as we can establish them. So Libra season gets us a little bit more into the diciness that we will experience in a much clearer way in Scorpio season. And then Scorpio season will lean into eclipse season. And then we've got a bunch of kind of headline astrology happening in December. So yeah, so it's about kind of staying balanced, which is such a trite thing to say about Libra. But when we are thinking about the archetype of Libra, Libra is the only symbol of any of the zodiac signs that is not a living creature. Every other sign is, whether human or part human or animal, has a heartbeat, and Libra is the scales. Libra is the fulcrum. Libra is the ability to step outside of ourselves and to get objective and to get abstract. And it's so funny because, right, Libra is about relating. And so in some ways we could think of it as one of the most subjective signs, but it's actually the sign that asks us to be the most objective. So when we're talking about balancing things, there's a way in which Libra asks us to move out of ourselves and to sit right at the fulcrum of weighing and considering the impacts of our actions, and really trying to consider unforeseen consequences in the way that we're doing that. And we'll run into unforeseen consequences during this Libra season by virtue of Mercury's retrograde in Libra. So let's get right into kind of where we are at the beginning of Libra season. So we're coming off again of kind of a lull with Virgo season. I mentioned this in my last video. There just wasn't a ton of aspects happening in Virgo season. No planet stationed retrograde or direct. And so it was a little bit quieter. And so we're coming off of that. Libra season is not going to be like that. There are a bunch of aspects. We have a bunch of planets stationing direct. We've got Mercury's retrograde contained within Libra season. We have all of the outer planets retrograde, but as I said, 3 of them will go direct. Jupiter, Saturn, and Pluto will all go direct during Libra season. And then at the beginning, we have Venus and Scorpio. And this is significant because Venus is the ruler of Libra, and she is struggling a little bit in Scorpio. Not struggling because Venus and Scorpio is bad, but struggling because Scorpio is not very conducive to traditional Venusian things like harmony and connection. So she's struggling a little bit, and we kind of start off Libra season with a bang, because one day into Libra season, Venus is going to oppose Uranus, but I will get to that. So we're going to start with Venus in Scorpio. By the end, she is going to be well into Sagittarius. And so in the back of our minds, you need to be thinking about Venus is getting so far out ahead of the sun. She's moving quickly. She's more than one sign ahead of the sun. And when that happens, we need to be thinking, okay, we're about to start getting retrogrades. Because when she reaches more than 40 degrees ahead of the sun, she's going to station retrograde and loop back. And so that'll be one of the stories of this winter. Venus stations retrograde conjunct Pluto a few days before Christmas, very close to the winter solstice. And so we're kind of tracking that as well. The big seasons of Libra, or the big story of Libra season, are going to be that Mercury retrograde. We have a Mars cycle restart. So this happens about every 2 years with the sun's conjunction with Mars, which I'm always surprised how long the Mars cycle is, but just having to do with the relative speeds of the sun and Mars, we get about every 2 years. The sun conjoins Mars and goes from this very old Mars that we're in right now. If you think about like this old man, I think about Odysseus at the end of the Odyssey, right? This warrior that has been on a long journey, and right, it's not a fighting Mars. The fighting is kind of behind it, but we'll have that restart, and the Mars cycle will restart, and we'll get a fresh young Mars reborn. And then we have all of these outer planets stationing direct, which I've said several times. Okay, so when we get right into it, we are coming down off of the Pisces full moon that happens on September 20th. I have a whole separate video on that. If you want a little recap, you can go find it. Should be the video released just before this one, called the Pisces full moon. So we're still in the bright and busy half of the month when we head into Libra season. So the sun enters Libra, and then, as I said, the very next day, Venus opposes Uranus. And so I think we're going to feel this. We might feel it more on the 22nd as well. I tend to feel transits when they're building, and then once they go exact, there's kind of a release. Venus opposite Uranus. Uranus in general is really hard to make predictions about, because it's really, as trite as it is, expect the unexpected. And so with Venus opposing Uranus right at the entrance to Libra season, I think our relationships could take a tumble. And this doesn't mean necessarily our romantic relationships. Sometimes it's really surprising. Sometimes you're just like going along and suddenly, something happens with your mom, or something happens with your best friend or an old friend, or right, there's this kind of surprise element in relationships. And Uranus is in Taurus, which is the other sign of Venus's rulership. So we've got Venus, trying to make a jailbreak, saying, actually, the terms that I agreed to when I squared Saturn a week ago, I'm not good with those anymore. And so I'm going to do something very Uranian and make a run for it. And so just when we know that, we can say like, oh, okay, this is going to be an interesting Libra season coming into it on this aspect. A few days later, we have Mars trine to Saturn. So Mars is also in Libra, trining Saturn in Aquarius. This is a really great time to just get stuff done. Mars can be a little bit lazy in Libra, doesn't really like to get uncomfortable, but if you can kind of get Mars drunk on the beauty of ideas Yeah, then Mars will do just about anything just because it's pretty. It's Libra. Yeah, so a great time for pushing yourself to live by your principles. Then the very next day, we have Mercury stationing retrograde. So we've been in the shadow of the retrograde for 3 weeks now. We went in on the Virgo new moon on September 6th. So you may see some things that you've been dealing with between September 6th and the 26th are going to come up again between the 26th and when Mercury stations direct on the 18th. Generally, where the first part of the retrogrades are more difficult because they're more confusing, they're more disorienting. It's a really good time to go back and reconsider things. So that the retrograde will happen between 25 degrees of Libra and 10 degrees of Libra. So if you have any placements in the second half of Libra, or I guess that's like the middle, Mercury will be visiting those placements 3 times. So they're kind of up for review. I have some helpful kind of teaching tools on my Instagram that talk about how and why this Mercury retrograde might affect you more or less than other people. If you have anything between 25 and 10 degrees of any of the other cardinal signs, so that's Capricorn, Cancer, and Aries, they will also be receiving a hard aspect from this Mercury retrograde. So that stuff could come up too. So now, okay, now we're in it and Mercury is in retrograde and we have to be careful. You know, Mercury in retrograde in Libra is interesting because Mercury in Libra is the diplomat, is trying to communicate things in a really peaceful way. And when it goes retrograde in Libra, it's struggling to do that. And so it may not know how to, you may not know how to say something in a way that's not going to offend somebody, and you think you're doing it right, but then you offend them anyway, and then you have to go back and apologize, or you could be on the receiving end of that. The real thing for Mercury retrograde is don't rush. You don't have to rush. The idea that you have to rush is an illusion. You don't have to rush. So just take a breath. Things are going to take longer. It's going to be more complicated. If you are filled with urgency, you are going to make mistakes and it's going to take longer. So we can just really sit in our Mercury retrograde mantra, let things take the time they take so that they don't take longer. Okay. Then we have a 4th quarter moon. So we're in the waxing square of the moon to the sun. And so we're dropping into the 4th quarter of the month, the time when we wrap things up and when we rest. So we have Venus trine to Neptune and the sun trine to Saturn on the same day. I really like these 2 aspects happening at the same time because Venus trine to Neptune is very, very dreamy. And with Venus in Scorpio, that could be maybe a little bit nightmarish, because Neptune proliferates the imaginal and doesn't have breaks and there's no sobering shower when you're connected with Neptune. You swim in the deeps with Neptune, and that can be beautiful and ecstatic, and it can also be fearful and traumatic. So I see the sun's trine to Saturn as really a stabilizing force here. We've got the sun in Libra trine to Saturn in Aquarius. Libra is the exaltation of Saturn. And so we have the choicest parts of the clear-sighted and objectivism of the air signs in a way that we can really kind of move this Venus-Neptune trine and channel it in really, really creative but embodied ways. So I really like that. And then we've got Venus square to Jupiter not a big deal when the benefics square each other. Sometimes you're dealing with too much of a good thing and how to handle it, or you have to choose between two good things. And while that might be annoying, it's not a bad thing. Then we move into October with Mercury square to Pluto. So Mercury will go through 3 squares to Pluto during the course of its retrograde, but it's also going through 3 trines to Jupiter. So we've got intensity with Pluto, we've got abundance with Jupiter. So, it's kind of a mixed bag. I really love Mercury retrogrades because they're such a great time to kind of put your vehicle into some low gears and process things more slowly. They're such a great time to go back and reevaluate so that when Mercury goes direct, you have a better sense of where you're going and what is authentic about you doing that. Then we've got Venus sextile Pluto. That should not be a square. That should be a sextile. Venus sextiles Pluto, which again, I'm tracking. I might not have normally even included this aspect because I think the sextiles we can pass over pretty easily, but I'm tracking Venus's relationship with Pluto more and more this year because Venus will station retrograde conjunct Pluto around the winter solstice. So just noticing, right? Because Venus combined with Pluto is increasing the sense of intensity in our relationships. And then we have a retrograde Mercury trine Jupiter. So as I said, Mercury will square Pluto 3 times and trine Jupiter. Jupiter trine Mercury is their insights and their epiphanies that kind of break open. So we already had one in Virgo season, and then we'll get this one. And then there will even be a third. Okay, so we're winding down towards the new moon. We have a Libra new moon on October 6th. I will do a separate video where I break down the dynamics and significations of this Libra new moon. On the same day, Pluto stations direct. So Pluto has been retrograde since the end of April. Pluto spends 44% of the time retrograde. So not a huge deal. We've all been in it. Pluto is moving very, very slowly through the last 10 degrees of Capricorn. If you have anything at 24 degrees of Capricorn, or really of any of the cardinal signs, so Libra, Aries, or Cancer, you might feel this one a little bit more. But otherwise, we're just shifting gears again. I think where you might be able to see this one functioning a little bit more is in the politics of the United States. But really, there's so much going on and so much tumultuousness in that right now. I think it would be pretty hard to pick out what a Pluto station would look like in contrast to everything that's already happening. The next day we have Venus move into Sagittarius. So I think that this is going to feel significantly better than the first half of Libra season. So the first half of Libra season, we've got Mercury going retrograde, we've got Venus in the sign of her detriment. And when Venus moves into Sagittarius, she's not in, she doesn't rule Sagittarius, but Sagittarius is ruled by Jupiter, and Venus is a lot happier. In Sagittarius, she has more energy. It's a fire sign. We fall in love with adventure. So she's got some relief from that. Then we have the Sun conjoin Mars. So as I said, we've kind of been dealing with old man Mars and not really being able to take action. This is the point of the Mars rebirth in the sign of Libra. And now it'll still take a little bit before we start feeling Mars kind of come back to himself, because he's still combust. He's still under the beams of the sun, which means we can't see him because he's too close to the sun. Once he gets about 10 degrees away from the sun is really going to be moving away from him because the sun moves faster. Then we'll kind of get access to this more decisive side of ourselves again. A couple days later, we have retrograde Mercury conjoin the sun. So this is called the cazimi. It's the midpoint of the retrograde. This is usually the turning point in the retrograde. Usually the first half is a little bit more difficult. And then after the cazimi, even if we can't kind of put things into action or fix things yet, we understand what has been leading us astray. And so we can, while we can't climb out of the holes we've dug, this is a moment where we can really stop digging. We also have Venus conjoin the South Node. So, and Mercury conjoin Mars right after, because again, the Sun and Mars are very close. So Mercury will conjoin the Sun and then Mars. This is really a day for recognizing dynamics in your relationships, I think, because we've got Mercury retrograde conjunct the Sun in Libra. We have Venus conjoining the South Node. The South Node tends to purge things, wants to get rid of things. And so when planets conjoin it, we feel the absence of them. Right? We feel the absence of the relationships, the absence of the harmony, the absence of connection in that area. So it's really almost like we've got Mercury getting purified at the heart of the Sun. Meanwhile, we have Venus kind of disappearing into the South Node. And then we have Mercury conjoining Mars. And so there's a frustration in understanding how to connect with other people, because we've got Mars who's supposed to be doing it in Libra, and Venus just disappeared into the South Node. And we have Saturn stationing. So when these outer planets station, though I said, right, it's not as big of a deal as when the personal planets station, they are kind of providing exclamation points. So we can be in these extra Saturnian times. So again, this in combination with the events of the day before, I think this could be a little rough. I think this could be rough. I think we take the new moon to take some rest. And then a few days later, we're going to run into some Saturnian truths. The absence of Venus, right? And when you've got Saturn in the absence of Venus, you can really have the more potential for the isolating qualities of Saturn. This is also, so if you're dealing with that, if you want some help and some context, my Saturn return class starts on the 9th. And we are spending the first class talking about the progressed lunar return, which happens for everyone when they are 27, and the invitation it offers to come home to yourself. So we're taking enrollment for that class up until probably the day. So please come join us for that. Then we're going to have the moon form the waxing square with the sun. So we enter from the dark, quieter hemicycle half of the month into the busier, more engaged part. So we can see things picking up again. We've got the sun trying to Jupiter, which will be really nice, kind of buoy the sun. It can get bombastic, but again, we're talking about the air signs. And so they are pretty socially conscious usually. Then the killjoy of the sun square to Pluto, which can kind of, it can either be a dampening experience, or it can be the sun becoming very, very inflated. Jupiter stations direct that day. So again, we've got this punctuation point for Jupiter, stationing direct at about, I think, 23 degrees. Thereabouts of Aquarius. So if you have anything there, can get a hit of Jupiter juice, or anything around 23, 24 degrees of any of the fixed signs. So the other ones are Scorpio, Leo, and Taurus. Then the next day we have Mercury station direct and Mars trine Jupiter. So you've got Mars getting that hit of kind of the holy mission from Jupiter. And so can get a little bit aggressive, but it's still in Libra. So it's going to be getting aggressive through rhetoric and through ideas, and not walking around with a sword. Mercury stations direct. Now that doesn't mean everything just spins on a dime and you can send all of those emails without having to read over them again. Because Mercury will still take a little bit of time to pick up speed. And so Mercury is stationing direct at 10 degrees of Libra, and it's going to move over those degrees again. And it won't be out of its shadow until the beginning of November. So the pre-shadow, we kind of get the preview of what the Mercury retrograde might be about. We deal with it during the retrograde period, and then the post-shadow, we integrate what we learned. And just kind of wrap it up and make sure it gets behind us. Then we will have the third quarter begin with the Aries full moon on October 20th, and Mars squares Pluto. And I was kind of thinking about this Mars square to Pluto. You know, Mars rules Aries, so Mars is the ruler of this lunation. And so we've got, it just seemed like an interesting contrast to me how we began Libra season with Venus opposite Uranus, and we end it with this full moon that that has Mars square to Pluto in it. And so this one also has, there's a bit of a powder keg here. And the Aries full moon is always the time that we kind of remember our true sense of mission and our need to go our own way, and not completely surrender to the compromise of Libra. I find that it can get overly nasty really quick. And so I would just keep an eye out for that. Yeah, don't feed the fire on this full moon. Yeah, that's what I have to say about that. And then a couple days later, we have the sun enter Scorpio, and we come into Scorpio season, which will have many winding twists and turns in the subterranean land of Scorpio. I hope you enjoyed this Libra season video. Let me know how these transits are showing up for you in the comments. I hop on Instagram Live every Wednesday and do a midweek astrology check-in. So sometimes it can be a lot to digest this all at once. You can get it broken down in simpler terms over there. You can support my work on Patreon and get access to exclusive videos and exclusive astrological content over there. I have 2 classes starting this month. Starting in October, I have a Practice Astrology Together, which is a group study of charts and transits. It's for people that already know the basics of signs, houses, and planets, and want to kind of put their chart into action and practice into developing the knowledge of how and why something could affect their chart, and make friends while they're doing it. It's a super fun class. I also have my Saturn return class starting. So that is 3 workshops plus 1 Saturn return reading. And the first workshop is on the 9th, where we go over the progressed lunar return, and then we'll go over the nodal opposition on October 23rd, and then we will finally do the Saturn return in November, and then we'll do mini readings to integrate all of that information. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, you can find all of the information on my website through the link in the description. I hope you have a good Libra season. My parting advice is just, if we lose balance, we lose balance, whatever. We sweep up the broken plates. It's going to be fine. We've been through everything before. Just try to be kind out there.